Dr. Amara Chen had always been certain about one thing in her life. Humans and her people, the Zentari, could never have children together. It was impossible. The science said so. The biology said so. Everything she had studied for years confirmed it. She had even written research papers about it, stood in front of hundreds of scientists and explained why their two species were just too different. Their DNA didn't match. Their cells couldn't combine. It was like trying to mix oil and water. Simple as that. She worked at the Xenobiology Research Institute, one of the most respected places for studying alien life. After the Zentari made first contact with humans 3 years ago, everything changed. Two species, living on the same planet, working together, learning from each other. It was exciting and terrifying at the same time. Amara was one of the first Zentari scientists brave enough to work directly with humans. She wanted to build bridges between their worlds through science. The lab became her second home. White walls, the smell of chemicals, the soft hum of machines running tests day and night. She spent countless hours looking through microscopes, running genetic tests, comparing samples. Every single test showed the same result. Human and Zentari biology were incompatible. She presented her findings at conferences. Other scientists nodded in agreement. The government officials from both sides seemed relieved. At least there was one less complication to worry about in this new world of humans and aliens living together. Then came that cultural exchange program 6 months ago. Both governments thought it would be good for humans and Zentari to meet in casual settings, not just in laboratories or government buildings. They organized dinners, workshops, art shows, anything to help both species understand each other better. Amara almost didn't go. She was busy with her research, and social events had never been her thing. But her friend convinced her, saying she needed to get out of the lab once in a while. That's where she met him. A botanist named David Torres. He was studying how plants from Earth adapted when grown in Zentari soil conditions. She remembered walking past his presentation board, seeing the detailed charts about root systems and growth patterns. Something made her stop. Maybe it was the way he explained complex ideas in simple terms, or how his eyes lit up when talking about his work. They started talking about science, then about music, then about the small things that made them laugh. David wasn't like the other humans she had worked with. He didn't treat her like a research subject or an alien curiosity. He talked to her like she was just another person who happened to love science as much as he did. They met for coffee the next week, then dinner, then long walks in the park near the institute. Amara found herself thinking about him during work, smiling at messages he sent her, counting down hours until they could meet again. Her logical mind kept reminding her of the complications. Relationships between humans and Zentari were still unusual. Some people on both sides didn't approve. There were cultural differences to navigate, language barriers despite the translation devices, and the simple fact that they came from different worlds. But when she was with David, none of that seemed to matter. He made her laugh. He listened when she talked. He challenged her ideas without making her feel small. For the first time in years, Amara felt like she was living, not just existing between her lab and her apartment. 6 months passed like a beautiful dream. They were careful about being seen together too much in public. Not because they were ashamed, but because they didn't want to deal with the stares and whispers. Amara's colleagues at the institute were professional about it, though she caught some curious glances. David's friends were supportive, which helped. They built their own little world together, filled with quiet dinners, movie nights, and conversations that lasted until sunrise. Then the symptoms started. At first, Amara thought she was just working too hard. She felt tired all the time, even after sleeping for 8 hours. The smell of her favorite foods made her stomach turn. She found herself getting dizzy during routine lab work. Her senses seemed sharper than usual. Sounds were louder, lights were brighter, everything felt more intense. She tried to ignore it, pushing through with extra coffee and longer breaks. Her friend Yuki noticed first. They were reviewing data together when Amara had to excuse herself suddenly, feeling nauseous. Yuki, always the practical one, suggested she get a medical scan, just to be safe, just to rule out anything serious. Amara agreed, thinking maybe she had picked up some kind of infection or her body was reacting to something in the lab. The appointment was routine. She lay down on the scanning bed, the familiar hum of medical equipment surrounding her. The Zentari physician, Dr. Kalin, was someone she had known for years. He ran the standard tests, his expression neutral and professional as always. Amara stared at the ceiling, mentally going through her schedule for the rest of the week. She had a presentation to prepare, some samples to analyze, a dinner date with David on Friday. Then Dr. Kalin went quiet. Too quiet. Amara turned her head to look at him. He was staring at the screen with an expression she had never seen before, confusion mixed with disbelief. He ran the scan again, then a third time. His hands were shaking slightly as he checked the equipment. Is something wrong? Amara asked, sitting up slowly. Dr. Kalin looked at her, then back at the screen, then at her again. Dr. Chen, he said carefully, I need you to stay calm. Those words never meant anything good. Amara's heart started racing. Was she sick? Was something seriously wrong? 1,000 terrible possibilities flashed through her mind in seconds. You're pregnant, Dr. Kalin said quietly. The world seemed to stop. Those 2 words made no sense. They couldn't be true. Amara actually laughed, a nervous, confused sound. That's impossible, she said. You know that's impossible. I literally wrote the research paper on why that's impossible. But Dr. Kalin wasn't joking. He showed her the scans, pointed to the readings that confirmed it. There was a life growing inside her. Small, barely formed, but undeniably there. A hybrid that, according to all known science, shouldn't exist. Amara sat in her car in the parking lot for an hour after the appointment, unable to drive, unable to think clearly. Her entire understanding of biology, of her own research, of everything she thought she knew had just been turned upside down. She had spent 3 years proving this couldn't happen. She had convinced governments, educated other scientists, published papers in prestigious journals. And now her own body was proving her wrong. The implications were staggering. If she was pregnant with a human Zentari hybrid, it meant her research was flawed. It meant she had missed something crucial. It meant that barriers she thought were absolute were actually breakable. But how? Why? What made this possible? And beneath all the scientific questions was something even more overwhelming. She was going to be a mother. She was carrying a child that was half her, half David, and entirely unprecedented. A child that shouldn't exist but somehow did. Amara drove home in a daze, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't organize. She parked outside her apartment building and sat there for another 20 minutes just staring at nothing. The steering wheel felt cold under her hands. The setting sun painted everything in shades of orange and pink, but she barely noticed. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching her life happen to someone else. Inside her apartment, she went straight to her home office. If there was ever a time to double-check everything, this was it. She pulled up all her old research files on her computer. Years of data, thousands of tests, countless hours of work. She started reviewing everything from the beginning, looking for any mistake, any overlooked detail, anything that might explain what was happening. The numbers didn't lie. Human and Zentari DNA were fundamentally different. The proteins didn't match. The cellular structures were incompatible. The reproductive systems operated on completely different biological principles. On paper, what was happening to her body was still impossible. Yet the medical scans didn't lie either. Something was growing inside her, something that combined both species in a way that shouldn't work. She worked through the night, running simulation after simulation on her computer. She cross-referenced her old data with new parameters, looking for any scenario where compatibility could exist. By 3 a.m, her eyes burned from staring at the screen, but she couldn't stop. Sleep seemed impossible when her entire career, her entire understanding of science, was being challenged by her own body. Dawn broke through her windows, and Amara realized she had been awake for over 24 hours. She also realized she couldn't figure this out alone. Not this time. This was beyond anything she had ever encountered. She needed help, but who could she tell? This wasn't just a personal matter anymore. This had implications for both species, for government policies, for everything. David called her around 8 a.m. She had forgotten they were supposed to meet for breakfast. His voice was cheerful, asking if she was okay, saying he was worried because she hadn't responded to his messages. Amara opened her mouth to tell him everything, but the words wouldn't come out. How do you tell someone that you're carrying a child that shouldn't exist? How do you explain that you've been awake all night trying to understand how it's even possible? I'm not feeling well, she managed to say, which wasn't entirely a lie. Can we talk later? The concern in his voice made her chest tight. Do you need me to come over? Should I bring medicine or food? No, I just need rest, she said quickly. I'll call you soon. After hanging up, Amara felt terrible about lying. David deserved to know, but she needed time to process this herself first, to understand what was happening before she dragged him into this chaos. She needed to think clearly, and right now her mind felt like a storm. 2 weeks passed in a blur of secrecy and fear. Amara ran every test she could think of, using the lab equipment after hours when no one else was around. She took samples, ran genetic sequences, analyzed everything from every possible angle. Each test confirmed the same impossible truth. She was pregnant with a hybrid child. The embryo was developing, growing, somehow thriving despite all the biological barriers that should have prevented its existence. The morning sickness got worse. She found herself making excuses at work, claiming she had a persistent flu. Her colleagues were sympathetic but curious. Centauri didn't usually get Earth viruses, which made her story suspicious. She caught Yuki watching her sometimes with a concerned expression, but her friend didn't push for answers. Amara lost weight, despite the pregnancy. Stress was eating her alive. She barely slept, her dreams filled with scenarios of everything that could go wrong. What if the pregnancy harmed her? What if the hybrid couldn't survive? What if this became public before she understood what was happening? The questions multiplied every day, and she had answers for none of them. Finally, on a rainy Thursday evening, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She called David and asked him to come over. He arrived within 20 minutes, soaked from the rain, worry etched across his face. He had known something was wrong for weeks but had given her space, trusting she would talk when ready. They sat on her couch, and Amara tried to find the right words. There were no right words for this, so she just said it plainly, her voice shaking. I'm pregnant. David's expression went through several changes in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, then a smile started to form before he caught himself. Wait, he said slowly. But you said that was impossible. You were certain. I was wrong, Amara whispered, and saying those words out loud felt like admitting defeat. I don't understand how, but I was wrong. She expected panic, denial, maybe even anger. Instead, David reached out and took her hands in his. His hands were warm, steady, grounding. Are you okay? He asked. Physically, I mean. Is the pregnancy healthy? That simple question, focused on her well-being rather than the impossible nature of the situation, made tears well up in her eyes. I don't know, she admitted. I've been running tests, but this has never happened before. There's no data, no precedent, no way to know what's normal or what's dangerous. David pulled her into a hug, and she let herself cry for the first time since the diagnosis. All the fear, all the stress, all the sleepless nights came pouring out. He held her through it, not saying anything, just being there. When she finally calmed down, he pulled back to look at her face. We'll figure this out, he said with a certainty she didn't feel. Together. You're not alone in this. But my research, Amara said. My career. I built everything on proving this couldn't happen. What will people think? They'll say I falsified data or lied or... They'll say a lot of things, probably. David interrupted gently. But right now that doesn't matter. What matters is making sure you're safe and healthy. Everything else we can deal with later. His acceptance made everything more real and somehow more bearable at the same time. They talked for hours that night, discussing options, fears, and possibilities. David wanted to tell his family, but Amara asked him to wait. She needed more information first, needed to understand what was happening before they brought others into it. But she knew she couldn't do this completely alone. The next day, Amara asked Yuki to meet her after work. They went to a quiet cafe far from the institute, somewhere they wouldn't run into colleagues. Over coffee that Amara couldn't stomach, she told Yuki everything. Yuki listened without interrupting, her expression serious but not judgmental. When Amara finished, Yuki was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something Amara hadn't expected. What do you want? What? Not what the science says, not what society will think, not what's logical or illogical. What do you actually want? Yuki asked again. Amara realized no one had asked her that, not even herself. She had been so focused on the impossibility, on the implications, on the fear, that she hadn't stopped to consider what she actually felt about the pregnancy itself. I want this child, she said quietly, surprised by her own certainty. Despite everything, despite the fear and the unknown, I want this baby. Yuki nodded slowly. Then that's where we start. We document everything carefully, we keep it quiet until we understand more. And we make sure you get through this safely. The science will catch up eventually. It always does. That conversation shifted something in Amara. She stopped seeing the pregnancy as just a scientific anomaly to be explained and started seeing it as her child, a life she was responsible for protecting. The fear didn't go away, but it was joined by something else. Determination. Maybe even hope. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, especially in a research institute where people notice everything. A lab technician named Rodriguez processed some of Amara's medical samples during a routine inventory check. He noticed anomalies in the genetic markers, patterns that didn't match standard Zentari biology. Being thorough, he flagged it for review. Within 3 days, the anomaly reached the desk of the institute's director. Within a week, both the Human Zentari Relations Council and the Zentari Embassy were involved. Amara received a formal summons to appear before a joint committee. Her secret was out and the storm was about to begin. The conference room felt cold despite the heating system running. Amara sat at one end of a long table, facing a panel of 12 officials, 6 human and 6 Zentari. Their faces showed various expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Behind them, through a large window, she could see the city skyline. Life going on normally for everyone else while her world was falling apart. Dr. Helena Vasquez, the human co-chair of the committee, spoke first. Her voice was professional but carried an edge. Dr. Chen, you understand why we're here. Your medical records indicate a pregnancy that contradicts 3 years of established research. Research you yourself conducted and published. We need to understand how this is possible. Amara had prepared for this meeting, rehearsing answers in her mind for days. But now, sitting under the harsh lights with everyone staring at her, all those prepared words felt inadequate. I don't have all the answers, she admitted. I'm as surprised as anyone. Commander Thelvar, her own species representative, leaned forward. His skin patterns showed agitation, something any Zentari could read. Surprised? You built your entire reputation on proving cross-species reproduction was impossible. Now we're supposed to believe this was an accident? An oversight? I reported what the data showed, Amara said, keeping her voice steady despite the accusation in his tone. Every test, every analysis pointed to genetic incompatibility. I didn't lie. The science was sound based on what we knew. Was it? Another human official, Dr. Robert Chen, no relation, pulled up documents on the screen behind them. Because now people are questioning whether your research was thorough enough, whether you missed something obvious, or worse, whether you deliberately misrepresented findings. That accusation stung more than any of the others. Amara had spent years being meticulous, careful, thorough in her work. The suggestion that she had been sloppy or dishonest made her hands clench under the table. I welcome anyone to review my research methodology, she said firmly. Every step was documented. Every test was repeated multiple times. My conclusions were based on solid evidence. Then explain this pregnancy, Commander Thelvar demanded. If your research was correct, this shouldn't exist. You shouldn't be sitting here carrying a hybrid child. The room went silent. Everyone was waiting for her answer, and she could feel the weight of their expectations. I believe there's an explanation, Amara said carefully. Something we didn't account for in the original research. A variable we didn't test for because we had no reason to believe it existed. But I need time and resources to investigate properly. Time? Dr. Vasquez shook her head. Dr. Chen, you've been pregnant for over 2 months according to your medical records. You've known for weeks.
Why didn't you come forward immediately?
Because I was scared, Amara said bluntly, abandoning her diplomatic tone. Because I knew this would happen. I knew I'd be accused of lying or being careless or having some hidden agenda. I wanted to understand what was happening before everyone started judging me. One of the quieter committee members, a Zentari named Sial, spoke up. Has anyone considered that Dr. Chen might be telling the truth? That her original research was accurate for the vast majority of cases. But this represents an outlier? Biology isn't always absolute. There are always exceptions. Exceptions don't just appear, Dr. Robert Chen countered. There has to be a mechanism, a reason. And until we understand that reason, this situation represents a potential risk to both species. A risk? Amara couldn't keep the edge out of her voice now. You're talking about my child like it's a threat. We're talking about an unprecedented biological event with unknown implications, Dr. Vasquez said. You're a scientist, Dr. Chen. You understand why this raises concerns. We need to study this, document everything, understand exactly how this happened. I agree, Amara said. But this is still my body, my pregnancy, my choice about what happens next. The temperature in the room seemed to drop further. Commander Thelvar's skin patterns shifted to a darker shade. Some members of the Zentari Council have suggested that termination might be the safest option. For you and for both our species. Those words hit Amara like a physical blow. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Absolutely not. That's not an option. Dr. Chen, please sit down, Dr. Vasquez said, but there was less hostility in her voice now. No one is ordering you to do anything. But we need to consider all possibilities, including potential dangers to your health. We have no data on hybrid pregnancies. We don't know what could happen. Amara remained standing. Then we gather data. We monitor the pregnancy carefully. We bring in the best medical experts from both species. But we don't end a life because we're afraid of the unknown. Isn't that the opposite of what science is supposed to be about? Sale nodded slowly. She makes a valid point. Fear shouldn't drive our decisions. Careful study should. The committee argued among themselves for several minutes while Amara stood there, her heart pounding. Finally, Dr. Vasquez raised her hand for silence. We're placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately. You'll undergo regular medical monitoring by a team of specialists. All data from your pregnancy will be shared with this committee. And Dr. Chen, this situation will be kept confidential for now, but you need to understand that it will eventually become public. I understand, Amara said quietly, sitting back down. Her legs felt weak. One more thing, Commander Thelvar added. We need to test the father. If there's a genetic factor that made this possible, we need to identify it. That brought David into the spotlight, something Amara had hoped to avoid, but there was no way around it now. He's willing to cooperate, she said, though she hadn't actually asked him yet. She knew he would agree, though. He had promised to face this together. The meeting ended with more warnings and requirements than support. Amara left the building feeling drained. The sky had turned gray, threatening rain. She sat in her car and called David, filling him in on everything. He listened quietly, and when she finished, he said simply, "When do they want to test me?" "Probably soon," Amara replied. "Then I'll be ready." "How are you holding up?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "They're treating this like a science experiment, not a life, not a child." "Let them have their tests and their meetings," David said. "We know the truth. This is our child, and we're going to protect them no matter what anyone says." His certainty helped calm her racing heart. But as Amara drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The committee meeting was only the first wave. Soon the media would find out. The public would have opinions. Both societies would react, and she and David would be at the center of a storm they never asked for. That evening, Amara received a message from her family on the Zentari homeworld. Word had reached them somehow, despite the committee's promises of confidentiality. Her parents' message was formal, distant, expressing concern about her situation and suggesting she return home for proper care. The subtext was clear, though. They were ashamed. Her younger sister Lyra sent a separate message. Just 3 words: "I support you." Those 3 words meant more than all the official committee statements combined. David came over that night and held her while she cried. Not from fear this time, but from exhaustion, from feeling alone despite his presence, from knowing that the hardest parts were still ahead. The pregnancy was only going to get more obvious. The questions were only going to get harder, and she still had no real answers about how or why this was happening. But in the quiet moments between tears, with David's arms around her and their impossible child growing inside her, Amara felt something unexpected, not just fear or determination, but a strange kind of peace. Whatever came next, whatever storms they had to weather, she wasn't facing them alone, and maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The next morning, David went to the institute for his genetic testing. A team of scientists drew blood, took tissue samples, mapped his entire genome. Amara waited outside, unable to go in because of her administrative leave. Hours passed. She drank tea from the hospital cafe, watched people come and go, and tried not to imagine worst-case scenarios. When David finally emerged, he was accompanied by Dr. Yuki, who had been overseeing the testing. Yuki's expression was carefully neutral, but there was excitement in her eyes. "We found something," she said quietly, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Can we talk somewhere private?" They went to David's apartment, a small place filled with plants and books. Yuki pulled out her tablet, showing them genetic sequences that meant little to Amara's tired mind. "David has a mutation," Yuki explained. "It's extremely rare, occurring in maybe 1 in 10 million humans. It affects how his cells process certain proteins. Normally, this mutation has no impact on daily life. People who have it don't even know unless they undergo detailed genetic testing." "But," Amara prompted, sensing there was more. "But this mutation creates a kind of biological bridge," Yuki continued, her voice growing more animated. "It changes the surface markers on his reproductive cells in a way that, theoretically, could bypass the normal species barriers. It's like having a key that accidentally fits a lock it was never designed for." David looked confused. "So you're saying I'm the reason this is possible?" "Partially. The discovery of their genetic compatibility should have made everything easier, but instead it made things more complicated." Within days, the scientific community was buzzing with questions. How many other compatible pairs might exist? Should there be genetic testing for all human Centauri couples? What were the long-term implications for both species? Amara's pregnancy stopped being just her personal experience and became a matter of public policy. The committee called her back for multiple follow-up meetings. This time they brought geneticists, bioethicists, policymakers, and medical experts from both worlds. The discussions went in circles, everyone having opinions but no one having answers. Some officials wanted mandatory genetic testing for anyone in a cross-species relationship. Others argued that would be a violation of privacy. Some saw Amara's pregnancy as a beautiful breakthrough. Others saw it as a dangerous precedent. Through it all, Amara's body kept changing. At 3 months, her pregnancy started to show. Her uniform didn't fit quite right anymore. The morning sickness eased but was replaced by other symptoms: fatigue, sensitivity to light, strange cravings for foods she had never liked before. Yuki explained that her body was adapting in real time, creating new biological pathways to support the hybrid life growing inside her. "You're basically pioneering a new form of biology," Yuki said during one of their private monitoring sessions. "Your body is doing things that have never been documented before." "It's remarkable." "It's terrifying," Amara corrected, though she understood what Yuki meant. Her cells were literally evolving, changing their function to accommodate the needs of a hybrid fetus. Part of her marveled at the adaptability of life. The other part worried about what all these changes meant for her long-term health. David's life changed too. His quiet career as a botanist suddenly included security escorts and mandatory privacy briefings. Reporters started digging into his background, though the official story was still being kept under wraps. His parents, who lived across the country, demanded to know what was happening. The phone conversation where David told them about the pregnancy lasted 3 hours and didn't go well. "They'll come around," David told Amara afterward, but she could see the hurt in his eyes. His mother had called it unnatural. His father had asked if he understood what he was doing to his career, his life, his future. Only his younger brother had been supportive, curious even, asking questions about what the baby might look like. Amara's family situation wasn't better. Her parents stopped responding to messages entirely. Some of her colleagues from the Centauri homeworld sent formal notes of disappointment. Only Lyra maintained regular contact, sending updates about family news and asking how Amara was feeling. Those messages became lifelines on difficult days. At 4 months, the first complication arose. Amara woke up in the middle of the night with severe pain radiating through her abdomen. David rushed her to the medical facility where a hybrid emergency team was on standby around the clock now. The test showed that the fetus was growing faster than anticipated, putting strain on Amara's internal organs. Dr. Kalin, who had discovered the pregnancy initially, was now heading her medical care. He explained the situation carefully. "The hybrid is developing at a rate between human and Centauri gestation periods. Your body expected one timeline, but the fetus is following a different one. We need to help your system adjust." They kept her in the medical facility for a week, monitoring constantly, adjusting medications, trying treatments that had never been attempted before. David stayed with her the entire time, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair next to her bed, holding her hand through the painful moments. Yuki visited daily, bringing updates from the institute and a normalcy that Amara desperately needed. During that week, the news broke. Someone on the committee leaked the story to the media. Within hours, it was everywhere. First human-alien hybrid pregnancy confirmed. Scientists stunned by cross-species child. The impossible baby. The headlines ranged from wonder to horror, depending on the publication's bias. Amara's hospital room had to be moved to a secure floor as reporters tried to get in. News drones hovered outside the windows. Social media exploded with opinions from people who knew nothing about the situation, but felt entitled to judge. Some called it beautiful, others called it an abomination. Religious groups on both sides had strong reactions. Activist organizations demanded everything from celebrating the pregnancy to demanding it be terminated for public safety. Don't read the comments, Yuki advised. But of course Amara did. She couldn't help herself. The hatred from some corners of the internet was shocking. People saying horrible things about her, about David, about their child. Death threats started appearing. Security around the hospital increased, but there was support too. Messages from other couples in cross-species relationships thanking her for being brave. Scientists expressing fascination with the biological implications. Random people from both worlds sending encouragement. One message from a young Zentari girl said simply, "You're showing us that love can do anything. Thank you." The pressure intensified when conservative groups on both planets called for protests. Human First movements claimed the hybrid represented a threat to humanity's genetic purity. Centauri traditionalists called it an affront to their species. Planned demonstrations outside government buildings turned into shouting matches between supporters and opponents. David's workplace received threats, forcing him to take leave. Amara couldn't return to the institute even after being released from the hospital. They were prisoners of public opinion, trapped in David's apartment with security guards outside. The life they had built together seemed to be crumbling under the weight of something they hadn't asked for. At 5 months, during a routine monitoring session, they heard something that changed everything. The baby's heartbeat. It was strong, steady, a rhythm that was uniquely hybrid, faster than Zentari but slower than human. Dr. Kalin turned up the volume, and the sound filled the examination room. Amara started crying. David's hand tightened around hers. In that moment, all the controversy, all the fear, all the public opinion stopped mattering. That was their child's heartbeat. Their baby was alive, growing, fighting to exist despite impossible odds. "Healthy," Dr. Kalin said with a smile. "All measurements look good. The growth rate has stabilized. Your body has adjusted remarkably well." That evening, they made a decision. Instead of hiding, instead of letting others control the narrative, they would speak for themselves. David contacted a respected journalist, known for fair reporting on cross-species relations. They agreed to one interview on their terms to tell their story in their own words. The interview aired 2 weeks later. They sat together on a simple couch, Amara's pregnancy now visible, David's hand resting on her shoulder. The journalist asked thoughtful questions and they answered honestly. About their relationship, about the pregnancy, about the science, about their hopes and fears. "Do you regret this?" the journalist asked. Amara didn't hesitate. "I regret the pain this has caused people we care about. I regret that our child will be born into controversy. But I don't regret our baby, not for a second," David added. "We didn't set out to make history or challenge anyone's beliefs. We just fell in love. And now we're having a child. That's not political. It's just life." The interview went viral, viewed by millions across both worlds. Public opinion began to shift, at least slightly. Seeing them as real people, not just a controversial headline, made a difference. Some of the harshest critics softened their stance. Support grew louder than opposition, but not everyone was convinced. A group of extremists from both species formed a coalition, united in their belief that the hybrid pregnancy was dangerous. They filed legal challenges demanding the pregnancy be terminated for public safety. The case went before a joint human Zentari tribunal. The hearing was broadcasted live. Lawyers argued about rights, safety, precedent, and biology. Amara and David sat quietly in the courtroom, watching their lives be debated by strangers. The tribunal took 3 days to deliberate. When they returned, the lead justice, a human woman named Torres, spoke clearly. "While we understand the concerns raised, we find no legal basis to force a termination of this pregnancy. Dr. Chen has the right to bodily autonomy. The monitoring data shows no imminent threat to public health. This tribunal will not set a precedent of government-mandated medical procedures. Relief flooded through Amara so intensely she nearly collapsed. David caught her, holding her up. They had won, at least this battle. But the victory felt fragile, temporary. There would be more challenges ahead. At 6 months, another complication emerged. The fetus was too large for Amara's body structure. Traditional birth would be impossible. They would need a surgical procedure, combining techniques from both species performed by a hybrid medical team. The surgery was scheduled for 1 month before full term, giving the medical team time to prepare for every possible scenario. Dr. Kalin assembled the best specialists from both worlds. They practiced the procedure on simulations, planned for every contingency, prepared equipment that had never been used before. The surgery would take hours and require perfect coordination between human and Zentari medical techniques. The night before the surgery was scheduled for sunrise, a time Dr. Kalin said was optimal for both human and Zentari biological rhythms. Amara didn't sleep the night before. She lay in the hospital bed, David dozing in the chair beside her, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The impossible pregnancy, the public scrutiny, the personal struggles. Now it all came down to these next few hours. At 5 a.m, the medical team started arriving. 12 specialists in total, 6 human and 6 Zentari, each an expert in their field. They moved efficiently, checking equipment, reviewing procedures, communicating in the shorthand that highly trained professionals develop. Amara watched them work and felt grateful that these brilliant minds were dedicating themselves to saving her child. Yuki arrived just before they wheeled Amara to the operating room. She squeezed Amara's hand tightly. "You've got this. I'll be right here when you wake up." David walked alongside the gurney as far as they would let him go. At the entrance to the surgical suite, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I love you. Both of you. See you soon." The operating room was unlike anything Amara had seen before. It combined human surgical technology with Zentari medical equipment, creating a hybrid space for a hybrid procedure. The lights were specially calibrated to work for both species' vision. The monitoring equipment displayed vital signs in formats both medical traditions could interpret. Dr. Kalin appeared above her as they prepared the anesthesia. "We're ready. You're in good hands." Amara wanted to say something profound, something meaningful, but all that came out was, "Please keep my baby safe." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Dr. Kalin promised, and then the anesthesia took effect. The surgery lasted 30 hours, far longer than anticipated. David waited in a private room, joined by Yuki, and eventually by his brother who had flown in that morning. They didn't talk much, just sat together in tense silence, waiting for updates that came every few hours. "Everything is progressing. We're managing complications. Still working." The complexity was staggering. The hybrid fetus had developed in ways that combined both species' biology unpredictably. Some organs followed human patterns, others Zentari, and some were entirely unique. The surgical team had to adapt their approach constantly, making decisions that had never been documented in any medical text. At hour 26, a critical moment arrived. The baby's vital signs started dropping. The hybrid physiology was struggling with the transition from womb to outside world. 2 respiratory systems were trying to activate simultaneously, following different biological triggers. The medical team had to choose which system to support first, a decision that could determine whether the baby survived. Dr. Kalin made the call. They supported the Zentari respiratory system first, based on Amara's physiology being the dominant environment for 9 months. The gamble paid off. The baby's lungs activated, took in air, and the vital signs stabilized. 2 hours later, the first cry echoed through the operating room. The medical staff, exhausted from hours of intense focus, allowed themselves a moment of celebration. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had successfully delivered the first documented human Zentari hybrid child. David was brought in shortly after, once both mother and baby were stable. He approached slowly, almost afraid to believe what he was seeing. In a special incubation unit designed for hybrid physiology, his daughter rested. She was tiny, barely 5 pounds, but she was alive and crying with impressive lung power. Her skin was remarkable. It showed patterns similar to Zentari bioluminescence, but in colors that had never been seen before. Soft blues and purples danced across her tiny body. Her eyes, when they opened briefly, were brown like David's, but with flecks of silver that caught the light. Her features were a perfect blend, neither fully human nor Zentari, but beautifully both. "She's perfect," David whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Can I touch her?" A nurse guided his hand to the opening in the incubation unit. David's finger touched his daughter's tiny hand and she gripped it instinctively. That simple gesture, the universal baby reflex that crossed species lines, made everything they had been through worthwhile. Amara woke up slowly, fighting through the fog of anesthesia and exhaustion. The first thing she heard was a baby crying. Her baby. The sound triggered something primal in her, and she tried to sit up despite the pain. "Easy," Dr. Kalin said, appearing beside her. "You need to rest. The surgery was complicated, and your body has been through incredible stress." "My baby," Amara managed to say, her voice rough. "Is she okay?" Dr. Kalin smiled, a genuine expression of joy that transformed his usually serious face. "She's perfect, healthy, strong. Would you like to meet your daughter?" They brought the HFY incubation unit closer, positioning it where Amara could see clearly. Her first look at her daughter took her breath away. All the fear, all the uncertainty, all the struggles melted away in that instant. This tiny being, this impossible miracle, was hers. "Hello?" Amara whispered, her hand reaching toward the unit. "I'm your mother. I've been waiting to meet you." The baby, as if responding to her voice, turned her head slightly. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin pulsed gently, a Zentari expression of contentment. In that moment, Amara understood that biology wasn't just about DNA and cells. It was about connection, adaptation, and the incredible resilience of life. They named her Zara, a name that existed in both human and Zentari languages, meaning princess in one and star blossom in the other. Zara Webb Chen, the first of her kind, completely unaware of the controversy surrounding her existence. Just a baby needing her parents' love. The first week was difficult. Zara's hybrid biology required constant monitoring. She needed specialized nutrition that combined elements of both species' infant care. Her sleep patterns followed neither human nor Zentari norms. The medical team learned alongside Amara and David, creating protocols that didn't exist before. But by the second week, Zara started thriving. She gained weight, her vital signs stabilized, and the medical team grew more confident in her care. Dr. Kalin finally allowed them to hold her outside the incubation unit for short periods. The first time Amara held her daughter against her chest. Feeling that tiny heartbeat, she cried with joy so overwhelming it felt like her heart might burst. David took hundreds of pictures documenting every tiny milestone. Zara's first real cry. Her first time opening her eyes fully. The first time she gripped his finger with surprising strength. These small moments became precious memories, proof that despite everything, they had created a family. News of the successful birth spread quickly. The media coverage was intense but shifted in tone. Instead of fear and controversy, there was curiosity and wonder. Pictures of Zara, carefully released by Amara and David, showed the world what a hybrid child actually looked like. Beautiful, healthy. Just a baby. Dr. Kalin held a press conference explaining the medical aspects. He showed the data, explained the successful surgery, and emphasized that Zara's health was stable. "This represents a breakthrough in our understanding of biology," he said. "It shows that life is more adaptable than we imagined. The barriers between species are real but not absolute." The scientific community responded with fascination. Research institutions requested permission to study Zara's development. Though Amara and David were careful about what they agreed to, they wanted their daughter studied as a scientific subject only to the extent that it would help her health. She was their child first, a research subject second. At 6 weeks old, Zara was finally allowed to go home. The apartment that had felt like a prison during the pregnancy now felt like a sanctuary. They set up a nursery with equipment that combined both human and Zentari elements. A specially designed crib that monitored her unique vital signs. Toys that stimulated both species' developmental needs. Books in both languages, ready for when she was old enough to understand. Life settled into the exhausting routine all new parents experience. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, diaper changes, and brief moments of peace when Zara slept. David went back to work part-time, though his research now focused on hybrid biology applications in plants. Amara took extended leave, not ready to return to the institute yet, needing time to just be a mother. Yuki visited weekly, bringing groceries and adult conversation that kept them connected to the outside world. She always brought updates from the scientific community. 3 more hybrid pregnancies had been confirmed, all between couples with the same rare genetic compatibility that Amara and David shared. Their case had opened the door for others who thought their relationships couldn't include children. "You started something," Yuki said during one visit, watching Zara sleep in her arms. "Other couples aren't hiding anymore. They're getting tested, finding out if they're compatible. You gave them hope." Amara felt complicated about being seen as a pioneer. She hadn't wanted attention or to make history. She had just wanted to have a family with the person she loved. But she understood the impact their story had. By refusing to hide, by fighting for their right to exist as a family, they had shown others it was possible. At 3 months, Zara started showing unique developmental traits. She responded to both human and Zentari communication patterns. Her bioluminescent skin patterns seemed to express emotions, glowing brighter.